There are few subgenres of television which I regard with more affection than the Christmas episode. Growing up, the annual broadcast of holiday-themed installments of my favorite shows was an important part of the Christmas season, and I looked forward to it all year. Some shows produced new Christmas episodes every year, while others just made one and reran it every year. Either way, almost every show I watched had at least one Christmas show. The Simpsons debuted with a Christmas special. So did South Park. All in the Family, the original run of which was a little before my time, but which I found thanks to reruns, produced several Christmas shows, including one called The Draft Dodger that is one of the funniest and most moving shows they ever did. Perfect Strangers did a cornball masterpiece of a Christmas episode, The Gift of the Meepiat. MacGyver did a Christmas episode. The Madonna, that I did a video about as a part of my series of video essays about MacGyver. Mystery Science Theater 3000 has done a few Christmas-themed shows over the years. The first one was When Joel and the Bots Watched Santa Claus Conquers the Martians, and features the debut of the greatest Christmas carol ever sung, Patrick Swayze Christmas, and how could I not also mention the universally beloved Star Wars Holiday Special? There are many, many, many more examples I could add to that list. There are more recent shows, ones that were produced after my childhood and adolescence, that did memorable Christmas episodes too. The US version of The Office made several good ones. The original UK version of The Office did a Christmas special for its final episode, and it's a classic that I still watch annually today. I know Ricky Gervais turned out to be a transphobic piece of shit, but I do my best to ignore that while I'm watching it. And since its revival in 2005, Doctor Who has produced many Christmas episodes, and they have generally been a pretty big deal, repeatedly used to either introduce or say farewell to incarnations of the Doctor. But sadly, there is one long-running television franchise that has not joined in our reindeer games, as it were. One franchise that has turned a cold shoulder to the holidays. One franchise that has left its fans bereft and disappointed each December to ask, does Star Trek actually have any Christmas episodes? And the answer is, not really. But you will notice that not really is not the same as no. Not really is not an absolute answer. There's some room to move in there, room for creative interpretation. Hopefully enough creative interpretation to justify an entire video. We'll see. For while Star Trek has never produced a Christmas episode as such, it has released many episodes over the years that have acknowledged Christmas or dealt with themes which are familiar to us from those more explicitly holiday-flavored productions, as well as a few with plots that are reminiscent of some Christmas-time classics. The most obvious reference to Christmas in the Star Trek franchise is this scene from the film Star Trek Generations. After failing to stop Soren from blowing up a star in order to alter the course of the Nexus, kind of a wandering bolt of time travel lightning which Soren hopes to use to reunite himself with his dead family, Captain Picard finds himself in the Nexus, where he discovers he has the power to create his own reality, travel to the past or the future, or even conjure an alternate life to the one he actually lived. Since Picard's spent most of the movie so far dealing with grief over the sudden deaths of his brother and nephew, he instinctively makes for himself a family that he never had, a wife and children, all gathered happily together in a cozy house to have Christmas dinner. Picard's nephew Rene, who in reality is dead, is here too, alive and well. It's wintertime, there's a tree, there are presents, there's food. If one of these Star Trek people walked into the holodeck and just said to the computer, "Show me some Christmas," this is what they would see. It's like a Yule log exploded in the middle of Captain Picard's house. The holiday celebration is short-lived. Guinan, the ghost of Christmas present, shows up to remind Picard that, as awesome as the Nexus is, and as unlimited as his options are while he's here, none of it is real. And Picard decides to leave the Nexus and use its time travel feature to have another go at stopping Soren from destroying that star. And he drags Captain Kirk, who is also in the Nexus, back out into the real world to help him, and ends up getting Kirk killed, but that's not very festive, so we're not going to talk about that. The Picard family Christmas scene is interesting because it implies that Christmas is still a known and observed holiday in the 24th century. Picard is obviously familiar with it. Everything we see in the scene is drawn from his memory and imagination, and yet it's the only time in a Star Trek show or movie that we actually see Christmas being celebrated. That being the case, from here on out, we're going to have to think a little bit further outside the box in order to identify additional, what should I call it? Christmassy shit. We'll have to think a bit further outside the box to identify additional Christmassy shit in Star Trek. Like I said, despite not directly referencing Christmas, there are stories throughout the franchise that include themes and tropes that we associate with Christmas. For a recent example, let's talk about Star Trek Strange New Worlds. On that show, Captain Christopher Pike is not merely the commanding officer of the Starship Enterprise, he's the self-appointed party host. Pike is always inviting his crew over to his place for big, friendly dinner parties, serving them food which he cooks himself, and fostering an atmosphere of togetherness and celebration that can feel a lot like a family dinner during the holidays, only without the undercurrents of seething resentment and occasional outbursts of embarrassing yet grudgingly tolerated racism. As long as you don't get La'an started on the Gorn, that is. As I make this video, there are still 2 more seasons of Strange New Worlds to be released. They might do a Christmas episode. They've already done a musical episode and a bunch of wacky farce episodes, and apparently there's a puppet episode coming up in season 4, so a Christmas one isn't beyond the realm of possibility. Hey, maybe combine Christmas with another old sci-fi chestnut, see what I did there, and combine both of those with Pike's love of having dinner parties and do an episode where Pike invites everyone over for Christmas dinner, but unbeknownst to him, his homemade Christmas cookies have been contaminated with an exotic ingredient that causes everyone to temporarily swap bodies. They've done a one-on-one body swap episode, but they haven't done the party version, and definitely not at Christmas. I realize at this point that Strange New Worlds has more or less wrapped production for its 5th and final season, which means if there's not a Christmas episode in there somewhere already, there ain't gonna be one. That's fine. Maybe the Starfleet Academy show will use my Christmas party body swap idea. It might work better for a show with a younger cast anyway. So you can have that one, Starfleet Academy producers, if you want it. Just pay me my money. Or say you got it from that one episode of Angel, like I did. Between you and me, there is no party body swap episode of Angel. There is an episode where all the series regulars are magically reverted to their teenage selves, but still in their adult bodies. But there's no party body swap episode. Seems like there should be, though, doesn't it? Ah, Angel. What a show. Okay, back to Star Trek. Another concept that many people closely associate with Christmas is that of the sacred, spirituality. Those who celebrate a religious Christmas, or kick it old school, as it were, believe that the holiday commemorates the birth of Christ, the Son of God sent to earth as a savior to cleanse humanity of our sins. We've seen saviors, or people who believed in them at least, in Star Trek before. Sticking with Strange New Worlds for a bit longer, one of that show's best episodes is Children of the Comet, where the crew of Pike's Enterprise runs into a group of religious zealots who worship a comet as a divine arbiter of life and interfere with Pike's efforts to prevent the comet from striking a planet and wiping out a civilization. Might not seem all that Christmassy at first, and it's not, but like I said, we've got to think outside the box with this one. Ever heard of the Star of Bethlehem? It supposedly appeared in the sky to guide the 3 wise men to the birthplace of Jesus. One of several naturalistic explanations for what that was among people who reject the religious explanation but somehow feel the need to account for it as something other than a thing Christians just made up at some point, is that it was a comet. So, a comet that has been given great spiritual significance by a devout group of believers, that is worshipped as a bringer of life. Squint and tilt your head a little sideways, and it's practically a Hallmark movie. Another example of a savior figure in Star Trek is Captain Sisko on Deep Space Nine, revered by Bajorans as the emissary to the prophets. His coming was foretold by prophecy, He's seen as the bridge connecting the Bajaran people to their gods. It's eventually revealed that his mother was possessed by one of the prophets when he was conceived, and at the end of the series, he vanishes but promises to return one day. You can read Sisko as a Christ-like figure, and there's little, if any, squinting and head-tilting necessary. Also, he's another Star Trek captain who loves to cook. I bet those Christmas dinners we never saw on DS9 were amazing. That's a motherfucker who knows how to roast a turkey. And hey, as long as I'm finding Christmassy shit in Star Trek through its Christ stand-ins, might as well mention this guy. The death and resurrection bits of the Jesus myth aren't really what Christmas is about. That's more Eastery shit. But nonetheless, he did die and come back to life. All we need is confirmation from T'Pring or Nurse Chapel that he likes to announce when he's about to have an orgasm, and we can also say that his coming was foretold. Moving on from Christmassy themes and tropes, one of the parts of the holiday season I most look forward to is rewatching some of my favorite Christmas movies. One of those, and I bet it's in your rotation as well, is the classic from 1946, directed by Frank Capra and starring Jimmy Stewart and Donna Reed, It's a Wonderful Life. It's a great movie, and holy shit, has Star Trek riffed on it over the years. Okay, to be fair, I don't know if the creators of a Star Trek show have ever intentionally set out to make an homage to It's a Wonderful Life, so I'll just say that there have been several episodes that bear a certain resemblance to that particular film. For example, in the TNG episode Parallels, Worf finds himself shifting between alternate dimensions, experiencing what his life would be like if certain events had gone another way. He might end up married to Counselor Troy, or First Officer of the Enterprise, or best of all, Alexander might never have been born. Looked at from the proper angle, the TNG episode Yesterday's Enterprise plays like an inversion of It's a Wonderful Life. Instead of seeing what life would be like if she'd never been born, Tasha Yar sees what life would be like if she hadn't died, albeit in a corrupted timeline where Starfleet is at war with the Klingons, but close enough. Another episode that can be viewed as a variation on It's a Wonderful Life is my favorite Star Trek episode ever, DS9's The Visitor. In this episode, instead of seeing what the present would be like without him, Jake Sisko sees what his future would be like without his father, after Ben Sisko is accidentally trapped in subspace, compelling Jake to spend the rest of his life working on a way of rescuing his father. In both Yesterday's Enterprise and The Visitor, as in It's a Wonderful Life, the story is about the impact that the life of a single person can have on all those around them. Just like Bedford Falls without George Bailey, the Enterprise and the life of Jake Sisko are profoundly different with the absence of Tasha Yar and Ben Sisko, respectively. But maybe those are a bit too much of a stretch for you. How about this then? The most It's a Wonderful Life-ish episode any Star Trek series has yet produced, and therefore also one of the most Christmassy episodes, from Season 6 of TNG, Tapestry. This week, the part of Clarence the Angel will be played by Q. So you all know this episode, I'm sure. It's a favorite of mine. I've talked about it a bunch. Captain Picard dies and finds himself with Q in a white void, which Q insists is the afterlife. Picard is dubious, but Q wants to be a merciful god, so he gives Picard an opportunity to change his past. Picard's death was caused by the failure of his artificial heart, which he got after getting stabbed during a bar fight shortly after he graduated from Starfleet Academy. Q quantum leaps Picard back into his younger self and tells him that if he can avoid getting stabbed this time, he'll be returned to the present with his original biological heart, and he'll be able to live out the rest of his life. With little choice but to play along, Picard sets about the task of making his reckless youth less reckless. He doesn't behave himself completely. He sleeps with his friend Marta, a wild oat he originally did not sow. But he is enough of a stick in the mud to alienate his friends, including Marta, and also to avoid throwing down with a gang of space bikers and getting a knife stuck in his back. So when the fight doesn't happen, Q congratulates Picard for successfully changing his past and snaps him back to the present, where everything is the same on the Enterprise, except Picard. All the familiar faces are here, doing their familiar jobs. Data, Worf, Riker, Troy, etc. But Picard, he's still got the heart he was born with, so there's that. But he's no longer the captain of the ship. He's now a lowly lieutenant junior grade, assigned to the astrophysics department. And none of the others seem to know him. I mean, they know him as a member of the crew, but they don't give a shit about him. He's just a cog in the machine. But he's not happy being a cog in the machine. He wants to be the one turning the crank. And if he can't crank it, he'd rather just not even be here. So after a few minutes of experiencing this stabbing-free life, Picard goes running back to Q and says, "Hey, so if this is what life is like with a biological heart, I want my artificial one back, even if that means I have to die and spend eternity with you." And Q's like, "Shit, dude, it wasn't that bad. You still get to work in space." Nevertheless, he sends Picard back into his younger self again to let him have a do-over of his do-over. And this time, Picard does fight the space biker, and he does get stabbed through the heart. But when he returns to the present, he doesn't die. He recovers from the injury that killed him at the start of the episode. I guess Q really was a merciful god after all. Time travel and alternate realities are such commonly used concepts in science fiction, and there are so many different tropes and plots associated with them that It's a Wonderful Life might not be the first reference that jumps to mind when you watch Tapestry, but if you line them up side by side and look at them that way, the parallels start to stand out pretty brightly. As with some of the previous examples I talked about, some of the elements of It's a Wonderful Life are inverted. In Tapestry, George Bailey doesn't go back in time and change his past. He just gets to see what his town would be like if he'd never been born. Picard does go back and is himself the cause of the changes he experiences when he returns to the present. Those differences aside, both stories are about the importance of a single life and how the impact of that life can send out ripples capable of changing the fates of countless other people. Both stories are also about learning to accept that our pasts are what made us who we are. And even if we could go back and change some of the more shameful or painful bits, we shouldn't want to, because changing what happened then would also change who we are right now, and would alter or perhaps even erase the effect we've had on the world up to this point. George Bailey considers himself a failure, convinces himself that his town and his loved ones would be better off without him. But when he sees what life would be like for others if he'd never been born, he sees for the first time the positive impact he's had. He goes from hating his life and wanting it to end to begging to have it back. Likewise, Picard is ashamed of the man he was when he was younger, the impulsive, promiscuous, undisciplined ruffian who almost got himself killed picking a fight with a gang of aliens twice his size. But being that person then is what made him into the person he is in the present. He can't change one without radically changing the other. Just as George Bailey does at the end of It's a Wonderful Life, Picard asks for his old life back, to be the man he was, misspent youth and all. The only thing missing at the end of Tapestry is Picard rushing through the corridors of the Enterprise shouting, "Merry Christmas, sick bay! Merry Christmas, transporter room! Merry Christmas, you beautiful old holodeck!" I guess it wasn't actually Christmas in that episode. Still would have been funny, though. There's another classic story that many of us enjoy revisiting this time of year. It's a book, but it's been made into a movie a bunch of times. I'm talking about A Christmas Carol. I think I'd call it my favorite Christmas story. I know, my taste is so adventurous, right? I always enjoy rereading the book, and there's one particular movie version that I watch every year, and no, it's not the Muppet one. I like the Muppet one. I'm not here to disparage the Muppet one. The Muppet one is good. And I love the Muppets in general, but seriously, some of you need to calm the fuck down about the Muppet one. The movie version I watch every year is the one from 1951 that stars Alastair Sim as Scrooge. But there's another version that I also enjoy every single year, and it has a Star Trek connection because it's performed by Patrick Stewart. I'm not talking about the TV movie version he did. back in 1999 where he plays Scrooge, although that is actually a really good version. I'm talking about the audio version, which is essentially Patrick Stewart doing what he did in his one-man show version of A Christmas Carol. Not merely reading the book, but performing it, playing all the characters. It's fantastic. And if you've never heard it, you should really seek it out. I cannot recommend it highly enough. That's not the only connection between Star Trek and A Christmas Carol. In the 4th season TNG episode Devil's Due, we see Data performing a scene from the story on the holodeck. He plays the role of Scrooge, being haunted by the ghost of his old partner Jacob Marley. Captain Picard is watching from the side, and when the scene is over, he seems pleased by Data's portrayal. And who better to judge a performance of A Christmas Carol? When this episode originally aired, Patrick Stewart had already been performing his version of A Christmas Carol on stage for a few years, and later that year, 1991, he would bring it to New York for the first time. There are other Star Trek episodes with plots that are reminiscent of A Christmas Carol. The Star Trek Voyager two-parter Year of Hell sees the crew of Voyager experiencing a punishing version of their near future, which they are ultimately able to avoid when Captain Janeway hits the reset button. It's rare for one of the characters in the show to actually do that on screen, so kudos to the creators of Voyager on that point, I guess. She hits the reset button by crashing her ship into the villain's ship, but still. There's also the Strange New Worlds episode, A Quality of Mercy, where Captain Pike is visited by the ghost of Christmas Future, which in this case is himself from an alternate future where he has managed to avoid the accident that put him in a beep chair. Pike is jumped forward a few years and lives out events which we recognize as taking place during the classic Trek episode Balance of Terror, only with Pike in command of the Enterprise instead of Kirk. It does not go well. The Enterprise is badly damaged in the battle with the Romulans, and Spock sustains severe injuries similar to those Pike was destined to receive. Pike turns to his future self like, "Spirit, tell me if tiny Spock will live." "I see an empty chair at the science station, and a Cathera carefully preserved. If these shadows remain unaltered, the Vulcan will die." "Oh no, Spirit, no." "What's a Cathera?" "That's that harp thing he plays." "Oh, okay. That's what it's called?" "Apparently. I just call it a Vulcan harp." "Yeah, me too. Although apparently it's actually a lute." Anyway, Ghost of Christmas Future Pike tells regular Pike that no matter how he tries to avoid his beep chair accident, it's always Spock who ends up suffering instead. And because Spock has some important things to do in the future, if he's out of the picture, things go really bad for the whole Federation. So Pike resigns himself to his future and his sacrifice. Again, there is inversion, there is variation. In A Christmas Carol, Scrooge realizes that he must change his future, whereas in A Quality of Mercy, Pike realizes that he must not, that he must endure his painful destiny for the greater good. But the basic idea is the same, as it is with Year of Hell. Characters seeing or experiencing a bleak future, then seizing an opportunity to alter that future for the better. Scrooge's encounter with the Ghost of Christmas Future is a popular source of inspiration. When another story references A Christmas Carol, it's often specifically a reference to that part of the story. That's understandable. It's the most important chapter to Scrooge's character arc, the point at which he finally breaks down and commits to changing his ways. From the perspective of a Star Trek writer, it's also the point at which the story goes from being merely a ghost story to something even more fantastic. Scrooge's journey with the Ghost of Christmas Past could be interpreted as derived from Scrooge's memory, and his time with the Ghost of Christmas Present could be seen as a form of astral projection. And really, why shouldn't ghosts be able to do that? It should be part of the standard moveset. But when Scrooge views Christmases yet to come, that's time travel. And the creators of Star Trek have proven over the years that they love time travel almost as much as they love space travel. Some of you might be thinking, wait a minute, couldn't you also use A Quality of Mercy and Year of Hell as examples of Star Trek riffing on It's a Wonderful Life? Sure. I could also use Tapestry as an example of Star Trek riffing on A Christmas Carol. It could have been Q playing the role of the Ghost of Christmas Future instead of Q playing the role of Clarence the Angel. That's the thing about reading a work and looking for references, inspirations, or parallels to other works without knowing the intentions of the authors. It can be a bit like finding shapes in clouds. It's more about what you see than what was meant to be there. There's another less esoteric reason why an allusion to It's a Wonderful Life might also be an allusion to A Christmas Carol, and that is It's a Wonderful Life is itself inspired by A Christmas Carol. So if you reference one, chances are you're also referencing the other, whether you intended to or not. I have one more episode I want to talk about, and I saved it for last because despite the lack of explicit acknowledgement of the holiday itself, it might be the most Christmassy of all Star Trek's Christmassy shit. It's another one from TNG. Most of these episodes I'm mentioning in this video are from TNG. Why is that? I guess because, like Christmas, it's so cozy and comforting. It even has all the people you'd expect to see at a typical family Christmas get-together. The stern, impossible-to-please patriarch, the mom who's just glad to see everybody, the underachieving oldest son, the second oldest who is a little weird but gets along with everyone, the middle child who does most of the work, the artsy daughter who got really into tarot this year, the overachieving youngest son who everyone finds insufferable, the drunk aunt who just showed up, the cousin who will get hammered and start a fight, which he will lose, that guy's kid whose name nobody can remember, the friendless loser who got the pity invite. Everybody's there. Anyway, the last episode I want to propose as a Star Trek Christmas episode is from Season 6 of TNG, and it's called Starship Mine. You might know this one as the Die Hard episode, which explains its inclusion here. Since Die Hard is a Christmas movie, Starship Mine is a Christmas episode, according to the transitive property. As an English major, I'm certain this is mathematically correct. When the Enterprise pulls in for a scheduled maintenance sweep and the entire crew temporarily evacuates because it's the kind of maintenance sweep that kills you, a small gang of thieves disguises themselves as a work crew and sneaks aboard the ship to steal a highly explosive waste product from the warp engines that can be turned into a weapon. It's just too bad for these criminals that there's one more person on the ship with them: Captain Picard. He came back aboard to get his saddle and got stuck when the power was automatically shut off. It could have happened to any one of us. First, Picard encounters this guy, who is definitely not Tuvok, and figures out there's something fishy going on with this supposed work crew. He knocks not Tuvok out with a swing of his mighty saddle and, ironically, a Vulcan neck pinch, but ends up getting caught by one of the others in the gang and taken to engineering, where the leader, Kelsey, is impatiently directing their efforts. Picard causes a distraction and escapes, breaks into Worf's quarters and steals some weapons, which he uses to take out another of the gang before getting caught again. Picard gets brought back to Kelsey again, and the member of the gang who caught him is like, he shot the other guy with an arrow tipped with some kind of tranquilizer, and he left a note that read, "Now I have a crossbow, ho ho ho." What does that even mean? Unbeknownst to the thieves, before he got caught this last time, Picard ran ahead to 10 forward, which is where they're all headed since it's the last part of the ship to be hit by that deadly maintenance sweep, and set some booby traps. So when they all march into 10 forward, one of the crooks steps on a piece of gaffer's tape that sets off some sparks, which gives Picard the chance he needs to start the big final hero-villain fight. He scraps with Kelsey for a minute, but she breaks loose and manages to beam away to the ship that has just arrived to pick her up. It seems for a moment as though Kelsey has gotten away with her heist. But then Picard reveals that during their fight he managed to snatch the little stabilizer doohickey from her jug of explosive engine waste. Without that, the volatile substance explodes seconds after Kelsey beams away, destroying her and the ship she was about to fly out on. Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker. Like Die Hard, Starship Mine reminds us of the true meaning of Christmas, using brutal violence to stop criminals. After all, isn't that what God did when he sent Jesus to Earth to atone for the crimes of humanity by dying horrifically on a cross? Think about it. Or if you're like me and you observe a secular Christmas rather than a sacred one, think about that time Santa Claus killed all those thieves that broke into that family's house. In that movie where Hopper from Stranger Things played Santa? I know that movie only came out a few years ago, but I assume it's based on a traditional folk tale from Germany, I'm guessing. In all seriousness, part of what Star Trek does is call us to be our best selves, to embrace all people in all their infinite diversity, to be understanding and forgiving and generous with each other, and in so doing, to make today a little better and tomorrow a little brighter. If that's not the spirit of Christmas, I don't know what is. And so, as Tiny Spock observed, live long and prosper, everyone. Hey folks, hope you enjoyed this one. I'm going to let you know what the subject of the next Trek Actually video is going to be, but before I do that, I want to give shout-outs to some of my newest Patreon patrons and channel members. First, the new patrons. They are Franeep, thanks Franeep. MS Painter, thanks MS Painter. Matthew Carlson, thanks Matthew. Shay, thanks Shay. Cindy Deskins, thanks Cindy. Hazy Guesstimate, thanks Hazy Guesstimate. David C. Drake, thanks David. Will Napier, thanks Will. Corduroy, thanks Corduroy. Andreas Olbrich, thanks Andreas. Sam, thanks Sam. Matthew Crumlauf, thanks Matthew. Scuzzbopper, thanks Scuzzbopper. Justin George, thanks Justin. And now, the new channel members. They are Console Faust, thanks Console Faust. Luxinda, thanks Luxinda. Transhuman Tia, thanks Transhuman Tia. Mask for Magica, thanks Mask for Magica. If you want to support this channel, you can do so by going to patreon.com/Steve Shives or clicking the join button to become a member of this channel. All patrons and members get access to exclusive posts that allow you to vote in the polls that determine upcoming Trek Actually topics, and also submit questions ahead of time for my twice monthly Ask Away live streams. If you pledge $5 a month or more on Patreon, or become a member at the $5 a month tier or higher, you get a shout out at the end of a Trek Actually video. If you'd rather give a one-time gift than a recurring monthly contribution, you're always more than welcome to do that by clicking the thanks button right below the video, or via PayPal or Venmo. The links for those are in the video description. Many thanks. If you like what I do on YouTube, especially the Star Trek related stuff, you should also check out my side projects, The Ensign's Log, the Star Trek themed comedy podcast that I'm on alongside Jason Harding and Amanda Billings, and Trek Reluctantly, the watch-along stream Dana Cole and I do every Wednesday starting at 6 p.m. Eastern on this channel right here. As always, links in the description. Now, for next month's Regulation Trek Actually topic, we're going to move on from in front of the camera to behind the camera. Most of the time, the videos in this series are examinations of characters or themes, ideas, and creative choices found in the various Star Trek shows. But every once in a while, it's good to talk about some of the real people who created those characters and made those creative choices and put those themes and ideas on the screen for us to appreciate, or not, and argue about. Next time, I'll take you all the way back to the beginning, to the original Star Trek, to ask the question, who actually made Star Trek fly? That's next month. I'll be back then and a bunch of times before then, so until the next time you see me, whenever that is, happy holidays, thanks for watching, and take care, everybody.